Welcome to Christian Answers. My name is Jeff Short, and today we're going to be talking about a controversy in the news that has occurred recently, over the last couple of years, I guess, and that is pastors and evangelists flying their own airplanes here and there and causing scandal because of it, because of the huge price that it costs to maintain their own private jet airplane. Now, you would think that pastors of mega churches, huge churches, or televangelists, or Christian leaders of all types, you would think that they would have learned by now that owning and operating and using your own jet airplane for your ministry causes scandal. You'd think that they would avoid that. You would think that they would just make note to self, never ever purchase private jet airplane for ministry use because it's scandalous. You would think that they would do that, but they don't. They continue to do this over and over again, and it continues to be a bad testimony to Jesus Christ. And evidently, they're not thinking about the testimony to Jesus Christ. They're thinking about their own ministry needs or their own ego needs. I don't know. I don't want to try to get into their own head, but all I'm saying is they are causing scandal in the world by continuing to own and operate their own jet planes. So you could almost make a rule. And that is, if you're a pastor or an evangelist or Christian leader of any type, do not buy, own, and operate your own private jet. Don't do that, because you are going to get into trouble. You are going to cause scandal, and whatever you say to justify it is not going to be heard in this culture. So just forget about it. Just fly. If you have to, if you must, fly first class or fly on a commercial airline just like everybody else. Or if you have a big enough team, if you're having to move large numbers of people around the country, I don't know what the situation would be, but if you have a big crusade or you have a big rally or some big function and you have to move a lot of people, you can charter a plane or you can do all kinds of other things, but don't own your own jet airplane because it's going to cause scandal. So we have in the newspaper again a scandal, and this time it involves evangelist Kenneth Copeland, and it's reported on CBS News. It says, televangelist defends lavish lifestyle and use of private jets, calling it a biblical thing. So here we go. Kenneth Copeland, he is notorious for owning and operating his own jets to get him to where he wants to go. And so here was the article that I'm going to read from CBSNews.com. And it says, Kenneth Copeland, a Texas-based televangelist, was confronted by a reporter who grilled him over his fleet of private planes. His fleet of private planes. So he has more than one. So one is not enough. One jet plane owned and operated by Kenneth Copeland Ministries is not enough. He has a fleet of private planes. The exchange, which aired last month on Inside Edition, recently went viral over the weekend and showed Copeland justifying his luxurious spending. So even the world, even worldly reporters, especially worldly reporters, are trying to show Christians and preachers and Christian leaders and Christian churches as hypocritical. Okay, well, now they are actually onto something in this instance, because according to the Bible, if you look in the New Testament, Jesus and his disciples lived simply. They didn't have lavish expenses. They didn't spend a lot of money on themselves. They were at their business. Jesus says, I am out and about at my Father's business. And the disciples were known to carry simply a bag with them, a travel bag with them, and they had silver and gold have we none, says Peter, but what we have we give to you. So in other words, the disciples lived a simple lifestyle. Jesus, of course, is the model. He lived a simple lifestyle. But here, in contrast, hypocritically, we have ministers who are caught up in this success ministry. And so they're trying to outworld the world in its lavish display of opulence and success. So it says here, Inside Edition correspondent Lisa Guerrero asked Copeland about why he won't fly commercial as he was getting in a vehicle in Branson, Missouri. He defended it, making it seem to be a vital means to his ministry. He said, if I flew commercial, I'd have to stop 65% of what I'm doing. So he's making an argument. He's saying, well, this is not efficient for me to fly commercial. So I fly my own private jet, and it works out better. Guerrero questioned him about a private jet he purchased from filmmaker Tyler Perry, the Gulfstream 5. He replies, well, that's none of your business. Copeland, owner of Kenneth Copeland Ministries and a small airport in Texas, then said Perry made it so cheap he couldn't help to buy it. He cited a May trip where he traveled to 5 continents as a reason why he needed the plane. He also admits to using his private jets to travel to his vacation homes. So evidently this Hollywood producer, so-called Christian Hollywood producer Tyler Perry, and if you look at some of the movies he's made, it's very ambiguous as to his Christian commitment, but that's another whole thing. But Tyler Perry, evidently this Hollywood producer, had a jet plane that he offered Kenneth Copeland to buy at such a cheap price that Copeland said he just couldn't turn it down. He couldn't help to buy it. So in other words, he got a great deal on this jet plane. And, we all know how, tempting it is that when we see some item in the store that we're kind of interested in anyway, and if it's on half price or greatly reduced, a great purchase, great buy, a great bargain, we're all tempted to buy it. Well, it seems like Kenneth Copeland has a weakness for jet planes. And so whenever he needs one or thinks he needs one and he sees one at a great price, he just has to buy it, even though he already has one. Now, he says that he needs it for his ministry, and maybe he does need it for his ministry. Maybe he needs different size planes for his ministry. We can imagine all kinds of different scenarios where a businessman, for example, let's just take the business world, might need a larger plane for larger trips, and then might need a smaller plane for smaller trips. So if you have, intercontinental flights, you need one plane. If you need transcontinental flights, you need another plane. So we can imagine that there might be different applications for different size jet planes. But again, what does it look like? What is the appearance? What in the minds of people does it scandalize the gospel? Does it scandalize the ministry? And the answer is yes. And so if you know that it's going to do that, if you know that you're treading on thin ice by even purchasing one jet plane, if you're a minister, when you're supposed to be in it for the gospel and living simply like Jesus and the disciples, and if you're following Jesus, you're going to follow their example, then you're already treading on thin ice by even purchasing one. Now, going to a second or third jet plane, when you're already being accused of lavish lifestyles, it just doesn't make any sense. It didn't even make sense in the business world. For example, if you remember back in, I think it was 2008 or 2009, when Ford and GM and Chrysler were facing bankruptcy because of the downturn, the recession. And some of these GM, I think it was GM, Some of the executives flew into Washington to ask for a bailout, and they flew their private jets into Washington to ask for a bailout. And that scandalized their own efforts to get a bailout, because people were thinking, wait a minute, if they're flying in this luxurious jet to Washington to essentially beg for money to bail them out of the recession, that's a contradiction. That doesn't make sense. That's hypocrisy. And so the next time they came back into Washington, they had to get rid of the jet plane. They either, I don't know how, they flew commercial or they drove down or whatever, but they didn't come in there the way they had before in this luxurious private corporate jet to come begging for money. They realized that that would scandalize them, and that would actually hinder their business, because people would be turned against them and wouldn't receive what their product. And so they got rid of that. Well, what about Christian ministers? They know that owning these private jets is a scandal to the gospel because, of course, the example of Jesus and the disciples. And so why would you then, double down, triple down, and buy a second or even a third one, even if it made sense economically? Now, the argument that he needs it for his ministry, there might be an argument there. I don't know. I don't have access to his schedule. I don't know his ministry needs, and I don't know the financial cost-benefit analysis of owning a jet plane. I've never owned one, probably never will. And in light of how I know these things scandalize the gospel, I don't think I'd ever purchase one, even if I could afford it, even if I could justify it. I don't think I would do it because of the scandal that it causes and the way it looks. And there is a biblical principle here that these ministers need to consider. And I'll show you here in Romans 14, the Apostle Paul is talking about making sure to not do anything that would scandalize someone. He says, make up your mind, in verse 13 of chapter 14, make up your mind to not put any stumbling block or obstacle in your brother's way. And he's talking about eating meat that's offered to idols. And Paul says, well, we all know technically that the meat that's offered to these pagan idols, there are no real idols. And this meat was not really being offered to a real idol. And there's nothing wrong with eating meat. If you don't even know what was behind the meat, or that it was offered to an idol, or even if you did know that it was offered to an idol, so what? It's just meat, it's for the body. But if it bothers someone that this meat was offered to an idol and you bought it at the meat market for a reduced price, and somebody knows that and it bothers them, it bothers their conscience, then don't serve the food with meat bought at the pagan idol market. And it's just as simple as that. If it scandalizes others, don't do it. And the same principle holds here with these jet airplanes. Again, instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in your brother's way. So the principle is, these televangelists and church leaders and megachurch pastors should know that owning and operating their own private jet to fly here and there and everywhere, that's a scandalizing people. It causes people to stumble. It turns people off of the Christian message. It turns people off from church. It turns people off from the Bible. It turns people off of Christianity. So just forget about it. Don't even do it. Don't even think about it. Don't even consider buying a private jet for yourself and your ministry, because you know it's going to cause people to stumble. And rather than cause people to stumble, you would rather take commercial airlines or drive your own car or even walk wherever you need to go. I don't know. But whatever you do, don't do whatever scandalizes people. Make a sacrifice for your own personal self for the benefit of other people. So we don't have these articles being written by the secular press year after year after year, every year. Copeland, it says the journalist wanted Copeland to explain a comment he made in 2015 when he described flying commercial as flying in a long tube with a bunch of demons, and it's deadly. While pointing his finger at Guerrero, Copeland denied saying it initially before explaining that it's a biblical thing. People get pushed in alcohol, he said. Do you think it's a good place for a preacher to be and prepared to go preach to a lot of people? When somebody is dragging some woman down an aisle, it made me so mad to see that on television that I want to punch the guy out. I can't be doing that while getting ready to go preach. So in other words, he's saying, okay, I can fly commercial airlines to my speaking engagements, to my crusades, to my evangelistic meetings. I can fly commercial, but then I'm going to have to deal with all kinds of people and all kinds of garbage that goes along with flying commercial. There might be someone drunk, there might be someone on drugs, there might be someone crazy sitting behind me, there might be kids in front of me and back of me, and I'm trying to finish up my sermon and message and be productive on the airlines, and these people are distracting me. I can't be bothered. Again, that kind of talk and that kind of attitude scandalizes the gospel because it sort of puts him in a different category. It sort of puts him above people, and he's like, here are the little people down below, and I'm up above, and I need time to concentrate and do my important work, and all of these little people are going to mess up my schedule and keep me from doing what I need to do in my ministry, and so on and so forth. That scandalizes the gospel even more, that kind of an attitude. Now, we know what he's talking about. We've all been in an airplane situation, probably most of us. We've all been in an airplane where there are a lot of noisy kids around, and we can't even read. We can't try to get anything done on our laptop. We can't, if you're going to try to write something, if you're trying to do some work, you're actually trying to be productive on an airplane sometimes. If you fly commercial, that's impossible because you do happen to get seated by someone who insists on talking the whole time, or someone who's doing something obnoxious like playing loud rock music through the headphones that you can still hear. It's super loud. Or is watching some, pornographic movie or whatever on their laptop, and you're trying to do something and you can't do what you want to do because of the people around you. I understand that. We all understand that. And that's why if you have to do something productive on the airplane and you want to do something productive to be a good use of your time, try to upgrade to first class, where it's a little bit better up there. It's going to cost more. It's not as economical, but don't come across, if you're a pastor and you're a preacher of the gospel, don't come across like you're better than other people and that you don't want to, dirty yourself by mingling with the common people in a regular airline situation, because again, that scandalizes. And then, so the article goes on. Guerrero pointed out fancy clothing, planes, and limo rides that Copeland has, all of which the preacher acknowledged to having. I'm a very wealthy man, he said. Again, scandalous statements. Don't do that. Don't put yourself above people. Don't brag about your money. Don't brag about what you have or your accomplishments. This is not the right attitude for a minister of the gospel. She asked him about critics that think a preacher shouldn't live a life of luxury. They're wrong, he said. It's a misunderstanding of the Bible. If you go into the Old Covenant, do you think the Jewish people believe you should be broke? Guerrero said, "Are you saying that Jewish people appreciate money more? They believe in wealth," he said. "Some people would find that offensive," she said. "I'm not talking about some people. I'm talking about the Bible," he said. Guerrero brings up a Bible verse about rich men having a hard time getting into heaven, to which Copeland replied, "All things are possible with God." And so he proceeded to grab Guerrero's hand and pray for her. It's not the first time a big-time televangelist has been in hot water over a private plane. Last year, Jesse Duplantis asked his followers to pray about becoming a partner to his mission of obtaining a $54 million private jet. Creflo Dollar also asked his supporters to help him buy a $65 million Gulfstream G650 jet in 2015. So you have a number of these pastors and megachurch pastors and evangelists who jet set all over the world preaching the gospel, and yet in their wake they're scandalizing the gospel by spending so lavishly. And it's not just more charismatic or Pentecostal pastors, it's even just Bible-believing evangelical pastors. For example, at Willow Creek, the normally pretty credible Bill Hybels, of late, not lately credible, but before, was a well-respected leader in the Christian community, in the evangelical world, and he shared a private-owned jet with a mega-church pastor down the street in Illinois there from Willow Creek, Pastor James McDonald. And they went in together, evidently, and either bought or leased this jet plane. And again, it's not about justifying the need for this jet plane. They probably could justify it on paper. You know, if you look at a cost-benefit analysis of what your expenses will be if you fly commercial, and then you have to get a taxi, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you put it all together, and if you have a team of people that are going along with you to help set up and coordinate your events, you can probably, on paper, justify the purchase and the operation of a jet plane. If you get it at the right price, it's a great bargain or whatever. Like Kenneth Copeland was saying, Tyler Perry owned this jet plane and offered it to Copeland at a very reduced rate. And Copeland said it's a good deal. Well, maybe it was a good deal. It probably was a good deal. I'm not doubting that it wasn't a good deal. But what I'm saying is, even if you can justify it on paper financially, or even if you could, but they don't do that either. You notice that Kenneth Copeland or any of these pastors, they never have a sheet of paper with the whole cost-benefit analysis broken down and showing people and saying, see, this is how we justify it. This is the dollars and cents rationale for the purchase of this jet plane. They never bring that out for people to examine so that people could look at that and go, well, you know what? It actually makes sense money-wise for them to purchase that at that price and operate it rather than go commercial. And it actually makes sense financially. They're actually saving money by doing it. They never present any of that evidence, and people never can come to that conclusion on their own because we never have any of those statistics and the evidence that would justify it. So we have to sort of like just trust them that what they're saying is true. But in the case of Hybels and McDonald, it probably came fairly close to justifying it financially, but there's always that, you get the idea that there's that ego factor, which is the thing that really takes them over the top and makes them do something that actually will potentially scandalize the gospel and the church and Christianity. And that's what Paul is saying here in Romans chapter 14. He's saying, if you know something you do will cause someone to stumble, will scandalize someone, then you don't do it. You just don't continue to carry on as if you're the only person that matters and that what you need is most important. You consider other people in the process and you say, you know what, I could really use that jet airplane for my purposes because I do a lot of traveling, but I will not purchase that jet airplane even if it were given to me by Tyler Perry or whoever. Even if, let's say, Kenneth Copeland needed a means of transportation to get around the country, and Tyler Perry said, you know what, I'm just going to give you this airplane and use it. Even if someone gave you a jet airplane and now you were the owner of a jet airplane, even that may not be the best move, because if it brings scandal and brings ridicule, it brings secular reporters mocking and calling you hypocritical and people laughing at you for being a hypocrite, that drags down the whole Christian witness, and it wouldn't even be worth it then. So it's not just about the finances, it's not just about the practical benefits of these items like a jet plane or a yacht. Say you operated a ministry around a lot of water and you could really use a yacht to get around to these different places you needed to. Again, that might cause people to stumble. They might get the wrong impression of your ministry. And so you would probably need to just tell the person who wanted to give you a yacht for your ministry, I'm sorry, it's a good idea, it probably makes a lot of sense, but I know that driving around that yacht or that big plane or whatever would cause scandal. I'm going to have to pass on that deal. That's what Mother Teresa did. Remember, there were people that gave Mother Teresa these luxury Mercedes-Benz. She always sold those. She always got rid of those and used the money for charity. If you're given a jet plane, if you're given a yacht and you're a minister, a megachurch pastor or whatever, probably the best thing to do is sell that and use the money and use it for the ministry or give it to the poor or something. But in our culture, at this moment, in this time, if you go flying around in a jet plane that you own and operate, you are going to cause scandal. And so for the sake of the gospel and for the testimony of Jesus Christ, according to what Paul says in Romans 14, don't do it. And let's just hope and pray that these megachurch pastors get that memo point from the Bible and stop scandalizing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, I hope that's been helpful, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.